Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. Now this time round we're going to do something a little different. This video is going to be a short Q&A session, and this is a video type that I'm hoping that I'll be able to continue over the next few months, doing like one video a month. Originally these Q&As were something that I dealt with in a text form, but I thought it might be nice to move them onto here instead, so it's a bit more like a conversation as opposed to like a document that you can read up. Now, the questions for these videos are provided by my Patreon subscribers each month. And usually I may set a theme or a certain topic, but this time around, for the first video, I thought, well, let's just go with anything. So a lot of the questions that are going to be on here are going to be towards my artwork and what I've done with that. But a few of them are going to be relating to D&D. Now, for those of you who don't follow me on my social media or haven't followed me for very long, I'm an avid D&D player, but I'm also an avid D&D DM and have been running campaigns for the last 2 to 3 years. And a lot of my Patreons and some of my Twitter followers know about this, so they were very keen as soon as I opened questions to open a few questions about D&D. So what I'm going to be doing this is like sort of separating the video around two like different sections. The first bit talking about like the questions that relate to my artwork, and the second bit's in relation to my D&D/DMing/ everything TTRPG. So to get started, let's start on some of the art questions. So the first one that I've got is, what's your personal favourite piece to date? So talking about my favourite pieces is quite hard because if I've got several, some of them are because of either like how they came out or because of I learnt a lot from them. But I think probably my favourite at the moment is the one that I use for a lot of my promotional material, which is my lady swimming amongst sort of goldfish. It's my favourite, namely because of, one, I'm actually happy with the anatomy. Now, for those of you who followed me long term will know that I struggle with anatomy a lot. So I was very happy with that. The angle, it was a real struggle in places trying to get the colours right, but I'm really happy that the colours came out very nice, vivid, and that the colour scheme works very well. I'm also very proud of it because of the reflective light that I managed to get on it. There's bits that I would like to improve, but it's one of those pieces where I think I completed it in May and was like, okay, yeah, I feel like I've leveled up a little bit. And it's kind of nice having those pieces every so often, because as an artist, you can very much sort of fall into this thing of just thinking your artwork's not good enough or that you're not improving in any way, shape or form. So it's nice having those pieces every so often that even if no one else acknowledges as them being a strong piece, that you know, like, okay, I did well on this piece, and it gives you that sort of psychological sort of boost, which I think is always nice every so often, because of artists tend to be very hard on themselves. Alright, so next question is, what made you first decide you wanted to be an artist? This is a difficult question, mainly because of it's like, I've always remembered drawing. I've always been drawing since I was a kid, and I think that's the same for a lot of artists, but also a lot of kids in general. I grew up in a family which was quite art-based. Like my mum, she draws a lot and has done since I was a kid. She's a trained interior designer, which means that she does a lot of technical drawings. And whilst she doesn't do a lot of creative stuff now in regards to creative drawings, she does every time she's like redecorating a room, she'll almost always do a technical drawing of what she wants, how she wants the furniture to look, to make sure that she's happy with how it's going to be before she even starts. Not only that, like my granddad and my grandma both paint a lot, and it turned out that actually my great granddad used to be a sign painter for pubs and things like that. So it's something that has always been very present in my life. In regards to actually being an artist, and I say being an artist in like inverted commas there, when I was 16, I knew, having got into the Buffy comics and really getting into comics at that sort of age, that I really wanted to tell stories through visual media, and it was one of the things that I got into then, namely with the Buffy comics. I remember the big thing where I was like, I want to be a comic artist, not knowing A, what it took to be one, and B, the amount of uphill struggle that is with that. However, as I got older, that got pushed aside a little bit because of, unfortunately, I also grew up in the environment where I was told that art doesn't pay, art won't get you a job. And I think what's very common for a lot of people my age, and it might be for a number of individuals, is that we were never told, Or at least it was never explained to us that, yeah, you could pursue artwork, but maybe you'll just do it part-time, and that's okay. You can do your dream job. It may not be your full-time job, but you can do it. It doesn't have to be your sole form of income. And because I was very much brought up that, oh yeah, you're never going to get a job in art. There's no way you can do it. Or if you do it, it's not going to pay well. Meant that I ended up going towards my sciences. Now, that's not to say I didn't enjoy doing my sciences. And actually my visual skills that I've got from doing a lot of artwork actually helped a lot with sciences, because of it teaches you your observational skills, which are incredibly important when you're a scientist. So I'd really encourage, if any of you are either art-based or even if you're a science student, please don't sort of think that all your subjects are so clearly delineated, because they're not. They're actually very closely intertwined, and skills from one sort of background can help with another. There's a reason why scientific illustrators exist. You know, artists that have got a basis in science mean that if you've got a scientist who needs a particular illustration, they can explain what they want. And because we know in science, it's very specialist terms, which mean very specific things. It's a lot easier to communicate with someone who's got that background. Then the turn side, as I said, having that visual ability to recognise meant that whenever I was having to do observations on either a biological organism or observations on a rock face, because I used to do geology about what the crystals look like, I found that in comparison to a lot of my contemporaries, I found it a lot easier. So I've not quite answered the question about what first decided to make you an artist. Just remember that Buffy comics were a big thing, and then when I actually decided to start selling at cons and start to take it seriously was after I worked at the Science Museum in London, and in one of our projects we were looking to do, it was suggested that, oh, okay, we might need to get some printed media for one of our props and get something printed. And then it came a whole thing of, well, it means we've got to hire an artist, we'll have to go through all these departments to get it sorted. And at the time I was still like drawing a little bit digitally every so often, and I happened to suggest, well, I've got all the tools, if you're happy for me to do it during my work break, like my work time, I can do it instead. And after having that experience of doing that and seeing that my skills could be useful, it was one of those things that I started really thinking about it a bit more. This is like after a 6 to 7 year gap where I didn't really draw, and decided, okay, well, let's go back into it. And then I think 2 years later is when I started doing conventions, and that really was a platform to start getting me to either do my artwork more, but really become what I'd say is an artist, as in someone who was drawing regularly as opposed to not just getting paid to draw. Anyway, I hope that answers that question. Okay, so next question, which is, who inspires you from your peer group? So a number of artists inspire me from my peer group. I've been very, very blessed that I've been involved in both the Comic Village here in the UK, which is part of the sort of MCM circuit here. I've met a lot of people through there who have been a great inspiration, but also because of Critical Role, which for those of you who haven't heard of it, although it's becoming a thing now where a lot of people have heard of it. So Critical Role is a D&D podcast / Twitch stream done by Matt Mercer and a bunch of voice actors where they play D&D. But because of Critical Role and the community that's grown around that, I've also met a lot of other artists who've been a great inspiration. And some of these artists include, from the Comic Village side of it, would be people like Sophia Lou, who I know is here on YouTube, RB Illustration, another artist here on YouTube, Kantaya, who's another very big artist here on YouTube, and she's amazing and a right darling, Jess Taylor, who I think she's got a YouTube channel, but I know she's also on Twitter, and she's done quite a few big things, along with some other artists like Casey, who's on Twitter, who's done a lot of work for Critical Role. Kit Buss is another one who I know her from college, which has been great in regards to like seeing someone go from someone who drew at the back of like a anime society class through to now being a very well-known artist because of Critical Role. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Megzilla 87, absolute inspiration. All these people have taught me different things about my artwork, and sometimes they've not just taught me things about my artwork, but taught me something about myself and how you approach artwork. Like Meg being one of the best people in regards to not putting yourself down and trying to stay positive. Sophie for her engagement with her YouTube community. All these artists, I mean, I will put a link down in the doobly-doo towards with these people on their social media, but they are all both very, very good people, as well as producing very good artwork. Because at the end of the day, you've got to remember, guys, that artwork, an artist isn't all about their artwork. And there's one person I have also forgotten who is a huge sort of influence on me, is Tess Fowler. So Tess Fowler is a comic book artist who does a few works like on kid lobotomy. I think she's currently doing the work for the D&D comic. I met through Critical Role, and I spoke to her a few times on Twitter, and in October I got a chance to meet her in person at MCM London. And not only is she a big influence in regards to art and approaching things like that, it's also in the fact that she is the sort of person who uses her position of privilege to help raise others up. And so she's been a big sort of influence and inspiration with not only my artwork, but also how we treat others around us and how we treat the social difficulties that are going on around us, and using your platform to help others. And I also really strongly sort of recommend people check her out as well. Her artwork is amazing. She's a brilliant person, and she's also one of the most genuine human beings that I think I've met as well in my life. Okay, next question. Who inspires you from outside your peer group? So actually, ironically, this is a lot harder for me because I have to sit there and go, who's outside my peer group who I actually really get inspired by? I mean, you've got the traditional sort of 20th century sort of art influences. So Art Nouveau is another one of them, which is a big one for me, as it was an art sort of movement that I became quite attached to in my youth. And I think that's the same for quite a lot of artists. There's something about the sort of soft self-shadedness that seems to be quite popular. I wouldn't say they were an inspiration now, but they were an inspiration quite a lot. For me as a kid was Clamp. I grew up a lot reading a lot of their manga and watching a lot of the animes that were influenced by their manga, particularly Cardcaptor Sakura. And I'm sure that's largely why so I think that's largely why I always do sort of very complicated outfits and hairstyles, and I'm very always interested in alternate designs for characters. In that vein, I think Final Fantasy and the Final Fantasy artists like Tetsu Nomura, again another big heavy influence on me and my art style. Lowish, so I've been following Lowish since, oh my goodness, oh gosh, probably at least, I want to say 10 years, if not more. I've been following her artwork for a while, and I've always just loved sort of her colouring style, and so she's always been a very big sort of influence in my work, along with a lot of the artists who worked for Lord of the Rings. So with Weta Workshop, they were also a very heavily big influence on me, particularly in my early years. Alright, what is your favourite style of art? I'm not quite sure, but what this question is actually going for. What is it depends on what you mean by the favourite style of art. Are you talking about art movements or things like that? But is it about my style or other people's style? So my favourite style of art, I don't know. I love 3D painted, soft painted things like what Lowish does in her style, but also this sort of, so when you see those soft 3D painted details. But I also quite like a lot of dynamic line work as well, like you see from a lot of the comic book artists or people like RB Illustration, absolutely loving the dynamic line that they're able to produce in their work. So it's a really hard one. When it comes to style, when you're talking about artistic style, I don't know, I always lean towards realistic. I mean, I remember at school I used to absolutely hate abstract. Which is something that I no longer do. I have an appreciation for abstract now, and it's something I actually really encourage. Again, guys, don't limit yourself. You're going, I absolutely hate abstract artwork, blah, 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 or any particular art movement. Have a look, have an explore, and you'll generally find that whilst you may not like the conventions of the whole movement, you may find a couple of individuals' artwork that you like. For instance, I never used to like generally abstract artwork. I liked being able to see what the subject was of what I was looking at. I always preferred impressionists and things like that as opposed to abstract artwork. However, I found this artist, her name's Fiona Ray, and she's part of the Young British Artists movement. And I remember walking through the Tate Modern on one of my my fine art A-level sort of assignments, which was you had to go to an art gallery and you had to find a piece of artwork that you liked and you had to do a whole module of work on it. And going around the Tate Modern, I absolutely hated most of the stuff that was up because I was just like going, it's a toilet, it's this. Like, I get that this is a comment on something, but this just does not appeal to me. And I remember going through one gallery and coming past a piece which is called Night Vision. It's done by Fiona Ray, and it's essentially just like a sort of charcoal grey giant canvas that's covered in coloured squares and has these like smears running down it. And my description is not doing it justice by far. But it was one of those pieces that when you first looked at it, it was like, oh, this is very simple. But the more you looked at it, the more complex it became. I don't know. It was just one of those pieces that stuck with me. And I ended up doing that as my sort of assignment. And after doing that, that really taught me sort of a lot about abstract art in regards to, and also about myself, about not shutting down immediately about, oh no, I don't like this. I can't learn anything from this because I don't like it. When actually you can learn bits that can influence other parts of your artwork, even if initially you were like, well, I can't learn anything from this. This is not how I draw. For instance, what Night Vision did a lot for me was getting a better understanding of composition and colour, because of essentially that was what that piece had to rely on, was its use of colour and its use of composition to make it effective. So yeah, I recommend guys do a bit of reading. Always push yourself outside of your sort of boundary marks, because you never know it. You might learn something new. All right. Last question. Nope, not last question. On the art side, what is your favourite thing about your art style? What is my favourite thing about my art style? I have no idea. What? I don't know. Oh, geez. I don't know. I can go with the favourite thing that I like drawing, and usually the bit that I'm happiest, and that's hair. I think that's the bit that I generally am like the proudest of whenever I do pieces. I like the hair. The hair came out great. It's also the bit that I enjoy doing a lot because I think it's the flowing lines I'm pulling off. So does that count? Maybe. Another question is, how long have you been drawing for? So this is a bit of a weird question because of actually there was a good period where I didn't draw, but I'd say I drew on and off a lot from the ages of like 13 through to 17, 18. And then I took a gap whilst I was at uni. So that ended up being about another 4 or 5 years. And then a couple of years after that, I didn't draw. And I've only really probably been seriously drawing now for maybe the past 3-4 years. So when I started doing conventions. It's why in some ways I sit there and go, I'm probably behind some of my peers, but that's not because of I'm any worse an artist. It's just I've not quite stacked up enough hours yet. If I'm being serious, like not serious, but if I'm being kind to myself without being too harsh. Okay, so another question is there anything from when you started drawing that you still find annoying or hard to draw even today? Anatomy I struggle with. Dear Lord, do I struggle? Save me. No, so I still struggle a lot with anatomy. Don't ever ask me to draw horses because I will cry. Landscapes I still find boring, but I need to practice more on because backgrounds. Another perennial artist struggle, backgrounds. So a lot of this you will hear from others. And another one important is hands. I really struggle with hands. Which is why if you ever look at my artwork, I tend to be very good at finding ways of hiding hands and hiding them behind objects or discreetly moving things in the way of them. So yeah, I hope those questions and answers have helped a little bit in regards to the art side of things. Now I've got a few questions here which relate to D&D, so I'm hoping that you guys won't mind us too much. There's only about 2 or 3, so well, here we go. So next one. So next question is, what would you say your dungeon master style is like? Oh, okay. So this is a bit of a hard one because it's one of those ones I don't want to be like, well, it's like so and so's style and in so and so's style. I tend to be a very narrative heavy DM, but I'm a narrative heavy DM who likes setting challenges for their players. I like having my players work for things, but I do it in a method of I want them to give them some sense of accomplishment. So I want to make it difficult, but not too difficult. I want to make it sure that make sure it's the challenges that appeal to them. Like, for instance, at the moment, we have in my Exandria game that I'm running, we have a couple of players who really engage well with detective sort of storylines or having to figure out puzzles in relation to piecing pieces of information together, subterfuge, figuring out who's lying, who's not lying. And one of those players is currently in the process of trying to join a guild of essentially not quite assassin bards, but bards who can assassinate people, but also will on occasion look to get information, so essentially be spies. And she has been set the challenge of simply going in to find at an undisclosed location. Like, she was not given the location. She was told she had 4 days before she'd have to find the masked man, why he was there and what he was doing, and as well as trying to place like a tracker on his person without him noticing. That was all the information they were given. So they now have got to come up with a plan that over 4 days they've got to try and gather the information, figure out how to gain entrance. And that's the sort of thing that I like playing with. I like giving riddles, puzzles, things that aren't immediately apparent until there's creative thinking. I also like particularly the case of this challenge, giving them something where they have to collaborate with everyone else. So giving them a team building incident that doesn't revolve purely around combat. Whilst I do combat, I wouldn't say it's not a priority for me. I do like combat, but it has to be combat that is clever, that has things that they're going to have to do, they have to think about it, and also that there's a narrative reason for it to be there, rather than it's just like, oh, here, go fight some kobolds. Also, I tend to be like, with combat, being like, oh, this looks like a cool monster. Oh, it's not the correct CR rating. Let's just mess with the numbers a little bit. Part of that is normally because of I do what I want and I like it to be fun. So it's like, well, if I'm going to play a monster, I want to make sure that it's one that I'm going to find interesting. 2, I never like going purely from the monster manuals because I've got a couple of players who've read that book back to front. And it's not that they will rules lawyer it, but they will be like, oh, but that monster can't do that because of this, this, and this. I'm like, well, the monster manual can't do that, but this monster can. Because I feel like, 1, it prevents metagaming. B, it makes it, I think, more fun and more exciting. And also, if you're like dealing with a large group of players, and depending on what classes that you've got, the CR rating that it usually recommends for battles can be pretty darn useless. You either end up with a match that is really, really easy, really, really hard, or just really, really boring. So I tend to go with a lot of the find something that is interesting and cater it to your group, which can be very hard if you're starting GM. And DM, it can be very like imposing, but it can be fun. All right, next D&D question. What has been your favourite unexpected moment within your campaign so far? Okay, so again, I'll probably go to the Exandria campaign. This is one we're actually hoping to podcast as of next year. So that's the one that's going to be done with Sophia Lou, Feline Trickster, RB Illustration, Discord Designs, and a handful of other people. What's the funnest moment that I've had or a favourite unexpected moment? That would probably be with Feline Trickster's character Trix, who is our bard. And to be fair, most of the fun unexpected moments has to do with this player and her character because of she's chaotic neutral and fun things will come out of nowhere and they're usually funny. And this was on a heist where they had to go into an auction house and by any means necessary get a particular item. And that could have been for a legitimate reason. It could have been like putting up money in sort of in the auction. It could be sneaking around. Anyway, so Michelle's character Trix and Discord Designs character Vin decided that they were going to try and cast sleep on several of the guards to try and put them asleep whilst they were sitting down in the auction. So they were sitting there dressed up as a lord and lady, trying to sort of subterfuge their way in. And thought, oh yeah, we'll put the guards to sleep and then we can sneak in the back. Unfortunately, in between them, they did not roll high enough to put them all to sleep. They managed to put a couple of them to sleep, but one of them remained awake. So immediately it was like, oh guys, get up, sort of like getting them to their feet. And because one of them was a wizard, I had to do a quick intelligence check to see if he recognised that actually those two characters have been casting. And unfortunately he rolled high, so he went over and immediately started making a ruckus with these two player characters. So these two player characters had dressed up like a lord and lady. They were playing husband and wife. And so when this wizard came up and immediately started like insulting them, going what on earth is going on, and really making a bit of a ruckus, Vin stood up and was like, oh, I'm terribly sorry, my wife, she's a wild magic sorceress, she doesn't know what she's doing. At which point our bard, so Trix, was like, oh, is this how we're playing? Oh yes, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Oh, achoo! And so as I sneeze, I cast Thunderwave. So she sneezed, cast Thunderwave, and every single one of the guards that had come up, along with the two bystanders, all failed their con saves. It was this idea that literally just half the room just got blown backwards, with people topping over like benches and everything. And it then devolved the whole situation into them running in the background behind to go and get the sword. And the wild magic sorceress, she ended up casting some things, including casting grease on herself. So the whole like shambolic like attempt of trying to get this item out turned into a complete and utter shambles, and it ended with the sorceress just like skidding up on her butt, holding up the sword and a ring, going like, got it, right at the end. And it just ended up going from something that went from very serious to just an utter shambles in the space of maybe 10 minutes, and it was hilarious the entire time. So it's by far one of my favourites at the moment. There are a collection of others, but I could wax lyrically for ages with those. So, final question. Who is your most loved NPC? Oh, no, that's another hard one. And I'll go with Xandria again for this one because these are the characters I've had the most time with. Oh, that's a hard one. And I don't think I could be able to choose one. Like, I've got my two old favourites, which are Vela and Markham. So Markham is a wizard shopkeeper who's a very soft boy. I need to draw him more often because he's a lovely, lovely character. Bookworm, etc. And his girlfriend slash fiancée now, Vela, who is a Marquesian sort of thief, and who's chaotic neutral and has been a real thorn in the side for the party. She has so far made their lives hell, got them to sign onto deals that had like hidden clauses, as well as getting them taken away by slavers, but at one point because they got in her way in regards to some other stuff going on. Vela's, I'd say, is definitely my favourite to play, because with the players she is the most reactive and therefore can influence the plot the most, because it depends on what the players do, can then have her change her motivation so much, so it can make that side of things very interesting in regards to, oh well, this could completely change. She's the sort that will scheme in the background, but she's not ever the bad guy. So it helps during like lulls of arcs where little hijinks may create sort of little scenarios from the players every so often. However, another character that's recently become quite a bit of a favourite, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, you'll recognise the name, is Lautaro de Luna. I love him to bits because, one, I love doing his accent, even though it is very, very, very hard. B, I love his appearance. And yeah, he's one of those characters that initially I thought was going to be not very well liked by the group. I was like, they're going to either love him or they're going to hate him. And in the end, the group absolutely loved him and adored him. And probably will have, at least next session, several of them trying to flirt with him to get into his pants, no doubt. Anyway, on that note, that's the end of the questions for this month, guys. Thank you ever so much for coming and listening through to the end. For those of you who aren't my Patreons, if you would like to have a chance to submit questions for next time, please feel free to join my Patreon. Patrons from even the lowest tiers at like $1 and $2 get the opportunity to submit these questions each month. And you will see at the end will be a roll of all my Patreon subscribers who have been able to support me and help me support doing this work, because without them I would not be able to continue making these videos. Anyway, with that, thank you for listening, guys, and see you next time.